Hello, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us for this Georgia Drawdown interview series where we are interviewing folks across the state that are doing fantastic work in the climate space. We are so glad to have Stephen Ward with us. Stephen works with Southface, which many of you I'm sure have heard of. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk with Drawdown, Georgia.
Wonderful. So let's jump right in. So please, Stephen, I'll allow you to introduce yourself more to our audience and tell us about the work that you do here at Southface.
Yeah, my name is Stephen Ward. I am fortunate enough to serve as the program manager here at Southface Institute for one of their programs called Building Improvement Toolkit, or BIT Building. I'll say it's someone who was born and raised in the Bay Area and did not realize that how much a bubble I had grown up in, and then to move to the Southeast. I was so fortunate enough to find Southface and help them do the great work that they do. And one of the reasons I love them is probably because of their unwritten mission, which is we try and make sustainability as accessible as possible to people, and help kind of remove the veneer that sustainability is for a certain type of person or a certain class of building, or costs a lot of money, or is for Silicon Valley folks, or is for smelly hippies. And I like to joke that I remember being young and playing at my grandmother's house in DC in the summer and coming in and forgetting to close the door. And she'd be like, "Stephen, you better go close that door and I'm going to get the switch." Right? Yeah. It's just that term has been co-opted to mean something othering. And so Southface really tries to help folks connect the dots and bring them back to sustainability is in our DNA. So, I love that about them. And so the program that I manage really tries to hone in on that. Southface touches every part of a building's life cycle. So from designing, financing, building, all of that. Where my role comes in is through the operations and maintenance portion. So probably the least sexiest, but the most important. Right?
Absolutely.
And so my role is really, how can I help people understand how much power they have in their everyday actions, and how those small steps really add up. Yeah. And it's all within our own grasp to do that, instead of saying, well, the facility manager has to do it, or we need to do HVAC. It's like, sure, but you also have a lot of power in your everyday actions. And so that's what BIT tries to do, is help folks understand how much power they have. And then that is what really makes building operations fun and exciting and communal, because folks like, this is a cool thing to do.
Absolutely. And I am really resonating with what you're saying, as somebody, our audience who watches us often has heard me say many times that I am from New Jersey. I'm not originally from the South myself, and definitely being in the South and being in and from the South doing the work gives one perspective, but being from somewhere else and coming to do the work here gives another one. So obviously you work for the BIT program at BIT building program at Southface, which I think I've heard of, but tell us more about the BIT building program. Tell our audience more about it. What is it, and what challenges was it designed to address specifically?
Yeah, so the BIT program, I am not technically trained. I have a music degree to my father's chagrin, and I have a business degree. However, as most folks who tend to be in facilities management, you probably did not go to your high school guidance counselor and say, when I grow up, I want to manage a building. You kind of find yourself in this space, and then all of a sudden you're charged with managing it in a more sustainable way. And so it's that disconnect that starts to scare folks off. Say, I don't understand how to actually implement that, how to activate that. It's just, I've been charged with it. So that's the space that BIT plays in, is how can we help those who may not be technically trained understand those everyday behaviors that they can do in ways that they can engage their occupant in order to take those baby steps, right? A company may pay $5,000 plus to have an energy audit done, right? But that tends to just sit on the shelf and collect dust because no one knows how to activate it. And so that's where BIT comes in, is how can we activate that? How can we help you understand that first step, the second step, the third step, and more importantly, how can that momentum continue to go? And so the idea is, how can we start to build a sense of community around operating a shared space, right? It's not just on the facilities team in order to ensure the building operates efficiently. As soon as you walk in the door, as soon as you turn on a light, as soon as you turn on, open a window, you're now part of the operations of the building. So BID is where all this comes in, is what are these everyday behaviors that people can engage in order for them to be better stewards of their environment without it being, you have to be sustainable. It's like, no, just use what's in your power in order to operate better. So BID sits really at the intersection of, I have this great idea, to how can I activate that and turn that into something that is going to be lasting and fun and starts to become part of the culture and not just something that happens to you.
Yes.
And so that's why it's exciting, because again, it makes sustainable O&M participatory, not just you have to do it because I said so. It's like, no, I want to do that cool thing. So that's BID. And so we're so happy that it has grown as we start to help folks understand the human aspect of it. It's not just operating a building, it's operating a building for the people inside. And so how can we all have a shared space through our everyday actions?
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. We talk a lot in this show about, how are we connecting people to the work, and how are we making sure that we're not so technical that we're losing folks, but that folks are really understanding the meaning behind, why we're doing the thing and why it's necessary and important for us to, as people, to connect with it just as it is for us to make sure that the architecture or the facilities operations of the building is, that both of those things are working in tandem.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Working in tandem.
Yes.
Love it.
Exactly. So Southface often says, buildings don't save energy, people do. And that's what you were just talking about, right? So what does that mean? Say more about what that means and why is it such an important context and concept for facilities managers to understand, not just for the people who live in the buildings to understand, but for facilities managers to understand as well. I think like when folks, many of us who are in our wheelhouse, in our niche space, it makes sense to us, but why is it important for us to understand that it's important for other people and how to connect with other people in that way?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite phrases, is that kind of reminds me of that sustainability is something that we have to do together. A building doesn't choose to leave a light on, right? It doesn't choose to report a leak. It doesn't, choose to say that a classroom is uncomfortable. People do, right? Yeah. And so technology matters, but technology doesn't create outcomes by itself. I've seen older buildings make this remarkable change simply because people start to recognize that their everyday responsibilities and that engagement is what turns into the outcomes that they achieve. And so for facility managers, it's an important reminder that they're not just maintaining equipment, but they're helping to create spaces where people can learn and can work and can heal and can gather and can thrive. And so at the end of the day, people don't necessarily care about buildings, right? They care about what the building allows them to do and how it makes them feel. It's not just this static build. It's not just this static building, which can be blah, versus, I'm helping folks live, work, thrive, play. And so that's why we have that people do at the end, to remind them of the why they're doing the things that they're doing every day.
I wonder, when we're talking about the ways in which people are, facilities managers are assuming that meaningful energy savings require investing in expensive upgrades, right? And talked also about, people being a part of it as well, not just like all these fancy things, all the upgrades, all the equipment that we have. So in your experience, how much improvement can organizations achieve simply by operating their existing buildings more efficiently?
Yeah, I think your question, like how much savings is there? It's far more than people expect. The challenge is sometimes it's with that word association. People think sustainability is more complicated than it needs to be, right? So you have programs like LEAP that help raise the floor, but part of the reason they do that is because it's document heavy. So we have someone who's new to that space. They're like, I don't want to do that. That's sustainability. And they get turned off. So it is, if most people don't come to a building thinking necessarily about energy use, but they come to work, right, or they come into building to learn and to work, or to, spend time with their community. The question isn't kind of how do we make people think more about energy, but how do we help people accomplish what they came to do while using less resources? We have to find kind of opportunities that don't require those expensive upgrades, right? Research has shown, DOE has shown as others, you can reduce your energy use simply through improved operations between 5 and 20%. The BIT program falls right in the middle. So our average energy savings are 13%, and that is purely through behaviors, right? And occupant engagement, helping folks understand, if I choose to turn off the light behind me, there is an effect to that. If I choose to not leave the window open when the AC is on, there's an effect to that. All of that is within their power. So as that resonates out in a community, that's when you start to see those healthy savings. Is simply through an awareness of my everyday actions are playing into how efficiently this building is operating. And so, I like to come to the table that people want to do the right thing. I've never met anyone who hates the environment, right? They're just association with the term sustainability is going to turn them off, right? Exactly. So how then can you use stories and other means to communicate that we have the same end goal, right? Mm-hmm. We just think about it in a different way. So, we want to make any way we're trying to help occupants do better is easy, it's convenient, and it has to be ready at the point of their decision, right? And so that's when we can really have these healthy energy savings, is simply through having these behaviors and processes in place that folks can get and want to do and keep doing it before you have to buy that HVAC equipment. And you may not even need such a large HVAC because you've started to reduce your wasted energy use just through improved behaviors. And then folks can take those same behaviors and go to their church or their school or whatever. So it resonates out. And so that's what's really powerful in just understanding what those everyday behaviors are. And that's what then leads to those pretty significant savings simply through an awareness and being empowered to do better.
I used to work more in sustainability than I do now. When I was working with schools, I started in my career on campus sustainability. So I worked with a lot of students and also who were doing a lot of sustainability work. And this was right around the time where student attention towards the sustainability of their institutions was real kind of exploding. And so there were a lot of young folks across the country that were making sure that their schools were sustainable and having conversations with their administration on how to make that better. And I think what I saw and what many of us saw as schools started paying more attention to their students and what they wanted is that there were so many things that they were already doing that could have improved that they thought they needed a new thing. You mentioned like, we might not need a bigger HVAC. If we were just using this more efficiently, it actually works fine. We might not need a thing, or might not need this, need that. And so finding ways that we can meet people where they are and do the work that's more efficient already in the space. And then once those administrations started to see the cost savings of that engagement around how the school operates, then they were like, okay, there might be something sustainability thing. Let's dig in more. Let's see how we can save money in more places and more places. And then they started talking about things like LEED and raising the floor. But they had to start at a baseline already, which I think was really important for both the administrations and also the students to be able to learn that that type of leadership development was really important for them as well.
I love that. Just hearing the story you had shared is that it seemed to be such a communal effort. It's like folks start to see the power of community. And so now they want to do even better instead of it becoming this siloed effect. And so that's what I find cool is that folks want to be in community. We just have to figure out how to speak to them in those terms that start to make the glue happen instead of saying, you're sustainable, I'm not. It's like, that's not true. You just don't think of yourself as a climate activist. So thank you for sharing that story. I love always hearing about the next generation being huge advocates and wanting to do more, just wanting how we can engage them better to help them do even more.
We spent a lot of time on figuring that out, and it was rewarding. So, we touched on this. What role does operations and maintenance practices play in improving energy performance, but also occupant comfort and reducing emissions?
It's foundational. But the challenge, I think, when people hear operations and maintenance, they think about the facilities department. But I would argue, let's start to broaden what that definition means or what that relationship means. And so a little bit of what I touched on before is that every person who walks into a building becomes part of the operations team. And so, the person who reports a leak, turns off a light, whatever, right? They all influence how the building performs. And so, start to understand that it's not just collections of equipment, but it's communities, of people interacting within a shared space. The best performing buildings, at least in my experience, aren't necessarily the ones with the newest technology, especially if the folks using that technology don't know how it works, but it's the ones where people understand how much power they have and that shared responsibility for a place that they all occupy. And then that's where the facility team may then manage the building, but everyone who walks through the door helps to operate it. And so that's why it's so important, because everyone has a role to play. We just have to understand that we're not other from it, right? You are part of this team. And again, as you go through the day and start to choose which actions am I going to do, am I going to turn around and turn off the light or not? You become a part of that operations and maintenance piece. And so that's why it's foundational, because it's not just a part of these staff, right? It's everybody who's in the building, which is why that part is so powerful, because it's that power of community that really helps to make those huge impacts.
You've been talking a lot about engagement. How are we engaging? What are we doing to engage people, to ask them and to help them change behaviors in order to make the operations of these buildings and our facilities more efficient, I should say? What can facilities managers, how can they demonstrate the value of energy efficiency initiatives to leadership? But I would also say to occupants or folks who are every day using these spaces. I think organizations often want to know, what does that engagement look like? From your experience, what is the most effective engagement, both for leadership, but also for the folks that are occupying these spaces daily, and demonstrating how, the value of energy efficiency can be beneficial to everyone involved?
I would say probably two primary buckets. The one is, how are we engaging leadership and having them have an understanding that this is a way we should go. The other part is engaging occupants. So just starting with the leadership piece, I think one of the biggest opportunities is kind of shifting the conversation away from energy and more towards people. But leadership gets excited about productivity and retention and occupant satisfaction. And so that's why I would encourage facility managers to talk more about the outcomes versus just the savings, because then there again becomes that human element and that story to tell behind the why you're asking leadership to do that thing. And so, well-run building isn't just more efficient, it's more comfortable, all of that. So that's, I think, where that storytelling matters, because data just kind of tells you how much energy was saved, but stories help to make that visceral connection of the why. And that, to me, is a much more powerful story. Data is great, but stories make hearts bleed, right? And so having that element, I think, really helps to move the needle faster, because folks start to put a face with what the initiative is trying to do, as well as its outcomes. In terms of occupants, I would say probably the best engagement is going to be walking your building. And I don't mean it just walking it every day with a checklist. I mean, walking the building as part of its community and starting to understand the why occupants are doing what they are doing, right? And then how to then help guide those behaviors to help them do better. Because again, people want to do the right thing. It just has to be easy, convenient, and available at the point of decision. So by not just walking the building and looking for anything that is wrong with the building, understand how your occupants are using that space, and then how can they be engaged to then perhaps shift their behavior to solve the same outcome, but it uses less resources. And perhaps it's a survey, perhaps it's just taking a step back and kind of seeing how the space is being used. For example, at Southface, we were charged with reducing our water use by 20% for Atlanta Better Buildings Challenge. And I was like, this is impossible. Like, we already have a very efficient building. What's interesting is once you started to watch how staff moved about the building, you're like, oh, there's a place for us to be more efficient. So a great example is we have dishwashers and plates, in our sink. And so what folks would want to do, like all of us want to do, is you take your dirty plate and you turn on the potable water, rinse it off, and you put it in the dishwasher. Like, you rinse the dish before you put it in the dishwasher, putting wasted water. However, that's just the behavior that they are. Exactly. So we implemented spray bottles on each of the sinks. So now folks can still spray their dish off, but they don't have to turn on the tap and turn on potable water. And so you end up saving 8% in our water use, right? Simply by having folks use the spray bottle, right? So it still is the same outcome. It's just we help to guide their behaviors by making that easy and convenient and at that point of decision for them to still do what they want to do, but using less resources, and would have never done that had we not taken a step back and said, let's see how this space works. And so every building is going to be different, but that's how you start to engage. It's like, let me understand the why behind that behavior so that I can help you make a better choice. And so, then, we all start to work together. So those twofold. So the human elements for leadership, and then the understanding the why behind behaviors for your occupants to help them, just be the better stewards of their environment through better behaviors.
I love those little tiny changes that we are doing and that folks do. When you talked about the dishes, that's so, people don't think about that. People assume that that's what we have to do. And all of us were taught, that's how, you wash the dishes. And so that little change, how it had such an impact on the usage. I love thinking about that and thinking about how we can help people be in relationship, to your point that you're making about being more in relationship with what we're trying to do when it comes to being more sustainable. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions organizations have about improving building performance?
That is a facility issue, that it lives over there with those folks. But in reality, we touched on before, is that, leadership may set priorities, the facility teams may put this, robust processes in place, but if no one's doing it, none of that matters, right? And so the common mistake is forgetting about those who are going to have the biggest impact on activating these initiatives and ensuring that they stay in place are your staff. And so how do you start to change culture so that folks want to do the thing? That, I think, is one of the issues is people don't realize this is a participatory thing. It's not one person telling you what to do, because no one's going to be happy. Where if it's participatory, then all of these great creative ideas can come together and it starts to become this beautiful space that everyone wants to do the right thing in because it's part of the culture. I think another challenge is folks think I need a new piece of equipment in order to do better. Maybe, but there tends to be a lot of space in between what I can do now until I can afford that new piece of equipment, so that we can start to build that or have that culture in place so that when we do get that new shiny stuff, it works as efficiently as possible because we're already aware of how our everyday actions start to affect energy use, right? So those are the two probably challenges, is that it's not my issue, it's facilities, and two, it's the power only lies outside of me in equipment, right? It's like, no, it's all of this starts from, it sounds so cheesy, but it starts from within. Understanding what I'm doing every day, this can really resonate out beyond me. And so how can we help facilities teams and all of them just operate the building better by being better occupants through having good behaviors that help to reduce our resource use?
Yeah. What do you feel like, we talked a lot about the idea that people are thinking that only the physical aspects and the physical features of the building is how we get more energy efficient and how we're more sustainable. And we talked about the mistakes that leadership makes, that thinking that only this lives with the facilities team and that there's no role for leadership or occupants in us becoming more sustainable. If you could give every facilities manager in Georgia who's working at school or on a business campus or any other types of spaces where there's lots of buildings and lots of moving parts. I know I don't envy facilities managers at all. There's so much to think about. And then folks ask you to start thinking about sustainability. So bless them all, honestly. Yeah. But if you could give every facilities manager in Georgia one piece of advice about reducing emissions through the building operations, what would that piece of advice be?
People want to do the right thing. You just have to find what is going to incentivize them to do the right thing. If you, again, easy, convenient, and at the point of decision. And so facility teams don't do it alone, but the best facility managers, I think, understand that they're not just managing buildings, but they're helping to create kind of this culture of stewardship.
Right.
And so, when people feel connected to a space and understand their role for caring for it, reducing emissions becomes less about the rules, right? And kind of more about the shared responsibility. And so the best, some of the best opportunities really aren't found in software. I'll say it again, right? They're found by paying attention to people and how that starts to become that communal element. So don't forget about how much power people can play in making your life easier, especially when you start to understand each other, because people want to do the right thing. They just have to be engaged in the right way in order to help them do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a historically Black college graduate. I graduated from college.
Yeah.
HBCUs are very important to me, both as just a Black woman who does racial equity work, but also as a HBCU graduate and as an HBCU alumna. And through bid for Resilient HBCUs, which I think is what it's called, you've worked directly with students investigating energy, water, waste, and indoor air quality on their campuses. What have you learned from involving students in building performance and climate solutions?
First of all, these students give me life. This is a big program and it's exhausting. But every time I start to engage with students, I'm like, oh, this is why I do it. Kind of that human element of the why. These students are so hungry, and you touched on this a little bit. They're into sustainability. It's just that faculty and staff are stretched so thin that engagement piece starts to get lost. So you have all this good intentions. How then do you activate that? And so what I love is that they bring a fresh set of eyes on how we can get them and their peers more engaged in this old man nebulous term called sustainability. I didn't know that colleges had campus influencers. However, it's like that's the conduit that folks start to resonate with. If I can explain to them that even though you may not be paying your dorm room's electric bill, and so you don't have to turn off the light, but if you choose to turn off the light, the downstream effect to that is that you are now helping to alleviate the environmental injustices that affect Black and Brown communities that live around these petrochemical plants that create energy that you're not using. And so again, helping them connect the dots so that I get the why behind that. I get the why I should choose to turn off the light, or I should choose to report the water leak, but any of that. So that's what I love about it. These fresh set of eyes is we're hungry to do better. Help us understand where our power is so that we can start to help our school do better. And so another example is we were touring one campus, and you went into one building and one restroom, half of the sinks were just dripping. And they're like, oh yeah, it always drips. So I was like, have you tried to turn off the sink? They're like, no, it just always drips. I'm like, well, did you try? And so one of them went over. Only one of the four turned off. But the fact that they didn't even think about, why don't I at least try to turn it off? And then they're like, ding, 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 ding. I have a lot of power just by being aware of the power I have. So that's why this program is awesome, because it allows, I think, anyone in sustainability to start to broaden its impact through having the lens of students being able to champion this in their own languages on TikTok, YouTube, whatever. I don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, my ultimate goal is that, you know, sustainability becomes viral, right? You have influencers. I'm going to date myself again. I don't know, Kim Kardashian doing a video. It's like, hey guys, everyone should turn off a light today. Make it sexy again. And by students picking it up, it's like, that's going to be cool. So again, they bring me because I'm like, you all are the ones who are going to help change the world, because you understand sustainability in a different lens than we do. And then you know how to activate your network in doing better, because it's fun, because it's communal, because it's cool. I'm really excited about what this brings, because a lot of the comments have been, you know, you can't unsee what you have seen. And so once you show them this is the power you have, they're like, I get it. So yeah, it's a great program. And so I'm happy that it's going on, and just grateful to our funders, Sustain Our Future Foundation, and the Environmental Defense Fund, and REGO for providing funding for us to do this pilot and get these students excited about how they can be champions of change on their campuses.
I'm always going to sing the praises of HBCUs. And I think one thing about historically Black colleges and universities is that it is imperative on our campuses. Our campuses are built on this idea around service. So we are learning about being of service to communities and ourselves and our communities, both our physical communities, you know, also, you know, the Black community in general as being HBCUs, and then the global community. We are learning about that from Jump Street. I mean, from when you hit the door. And so in talking to students about, you know, you turning off this light, you might not change your university's electric bill directly, but here's the communal, here's how that affects community. Here's how that affects. We used to go on campuses and say, like, how many people know somebody with asthma? How many people in here have asthma? How many people have family members with asthma? Black kids have twice as likely of going to the emergency room for asthma-related illnesses than any other kid, and then talking about why that's important and why that happens. And then on a campus, in a culture where it's built on community service and care and things like that, those students really start to resonate with that. So if you're thinking out there about, you know, your campuses, especially for HBCUs, you know, how are we engaging? Those are some of the ways that we have been able to do that. And it sounds like that's what y'all are doing over there at Bit for Resilient HBCUs. The cue right from your student leaders that you're working with, that's fantastic. I love working with students. I miss with students as much as I used to. I don't do it as much anymore, but taking good cues right from them. They are really, I think the end of Gen Z is in college right now, and they are really fantastic and have great ideas. And they know their campuses, they know their peers. You let them know what you're trying to say, and they're able to take it and run with it. So that's really great that you're utilizing that energy from them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And to your point of like kind of the legacy of HBCUs, you know, it was only till recently with the, you know, IRA funds, stuff was external. And so, you know, we've always been a community that's done more with less. And
right.
Having this be part of that, in turn, do more with less, even when it comes to climate resilience. Again, what's in your power, right? Don't wait for that new shiny stuff. That's nice, but what's in your power in order to not only just help alleviate your burden, but your community's burden, because we come from that, right? Yeah. And so this has just been a great extension of that. It's having to say, oh, this is another way for me to carry on this legacy through this lens. And so thank you for sharing all that, because kids, again, they give me life.
Yes.
So I'm really fortunate to work with them and just have them be so happy to say, oh, I have power. Let's explore this idea more, because I see how I can make changes on my campus. You know that being a Spelman grad, because you all kill it all the time. So Spelman and Clark Atlanta and Texas Southern and Morgan State and Xavier. Don't say ex-Xavier, you will get canceled.
Yes. For goodness sake, don't say ex-Xavier. Yes. I am aware. I'm very aware. Thank you so much for joining us and for talking about the BIT building program at Southface. I love ending with this question. It is my favorite question. And since we're talking about hope and how much the students give all of us really that type of life and energy, what is giving you hope around climate in Georgia?
I hate to come back to it, but the people. And I say the people because being on the outside, being from Berkeley, I had a different connection with the term sustainability. We were always kind of doing it. When I moved here, being a jaded Californian, I'm like, oh God, you guys hate the environment. But the longer I've been here now, I think 25 years, it's like no one hates the environment again. It's that they just relate to it a different way.
Yes.
So just because you aren't recycling doesn't mean you don't want to. It's just there may not be the infrastructure in place for you to do that, or it's inconvenient. And so that's why I say people, because people want to do the right thing. It's just how can we as facility managers help them do the right thing by making it as easy as possible. So people will surprise you, right? Again, they want to do the right thing. So I say that Georgia and really anywhere, it's the people, because they are the ones who can make big change. We just have to activate it. And so yeah, that's what I find about being here in Georgia.
I think what you're saying around that is so important for us to end on, because I think so many factors at play have made us think that all of this is so divisive and so polarizing. And I really want to bring back the point you said earlier about, I used to work at National Wildlife Federation. And so we have both climate activists, and we also have folks that work with folks that are in hunting societies and things like that. And at that organization, they have folks that work with both of those entities of people. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes people, so many factors have made us think that these issues are so polarizing. And it's like, no, the climate activists, you said this earlier, I want to reiterate it for folks. The climate activists want us to have clean water, and the hunters want us to have clean water. We all they both do. And maybe there are, very minor, slight differences in there, but there are also a lot of similarities in there about why they both of those groups think that is important.
Right.
And, why both those groups think that, us maintaining tree canopy is important. Climate activists think it's important, for the lungs of the planet, to make sure that we are, having, as much carbon as we are outputting, we are able to also, soak up, the trees are able to also soak up, but the hunters need that because they need that to maintain the population of the game that they're hunting. And so it's so easy for us to get so bogged down in the things that separate us. But I think the people, especially in a place like Georgia, the people really show us daily that we're kind of all caring about the same things. It's just some of these external factors that have made us think that it's polarizing and kind of pitting us against each other. But it doesn't have to be that way. And so I appreciate your words there, because I think that's a really, really important point for us to continue to drive home for folks.
Thank you. This has been fantastic. A great thing.
Thank you so much for talking about the BIT program at Southface. We love Southface. Southface is a fantastic organization. I love Southface. I've been working with them for years. And so it's good to meet you. Good to have you on our little show here. And I would love for people to get more involved and learn more about the BIT building program and the work that you all are doing over there. But we appreciate the work that you are doing and the work that Southface continues to do, not just for Georgia, but for the Southeast and for the country as well. So I'm glad you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a fantastic day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for joining us once again. And we will see you next time.